This Sunday on Capital Connection, we sit down one-on-one with Governor Pritzker and look back on his order to stay home 1 year ago this week.
We've got to make sure that we get people back to work.
Plus, how will Illinois spend $7.5 billion from Congress in federal relief?
And maybe we could take 350 million of that, or maybe even a little more, and say, let's push it into the school funding formula.
And the redistricting process is underway in Springfield as Democrats and Republicans start the process to draw the political maps that will define the next decade. It's all coming up on Capital Connection.
From the Illinois State Capitol Rotunda, Capitol Bureau Chief Mark Maxwell is asking the tough questions. This is Capital Connection.
Welcome to Capital Connection. I'm Mark Maxwell, reporting from the Illinois State House on this Sunday, March 21st. Our first guest this week is Governor J.B. Pritzker. He joins us from his office in Chicago. Governor, thank you for joining us. I want to start, first of all, with a question that is on a lot of people's minds this time of year. Are you running for re-election?
That's not something I'm thinking about right now. As you know, we've spent the last year fighting coronavirus, making sure that we're keeping people healthy and safe. We're still in the midst of that, making sure that everybody gets vaccinated. So I'm focused on that and doing my job.
After the outcome of the 2020 results, and from remarks from you and Senate President Harman, if we take all that together to mean that if you were to run for re-election in 2022, we wouldn't see the graduated income tax on the ballot. Why not?
Well, that's not up to me, as you know. That's something the legislature has the option of putting on the ballot. The governor doesn't even sign that to get it on the ballot. And so that's something, Senator Harman, President Harman, and Speaker Welch will have to decide.
Well, you did campaign on that in 2018. That was your biggest, I think you would call it your biggest campaign pledge, would you not?
Well, as you know, I had a big agenda and we got most of that done. And so my goal is certainly to make the tax system fairer in the state of Illinois. Right now, as you know, I put forward a balanced budget, one that actually has a nod toward that progressivity in our tax system by eliminating some corporate welfare and making sure that we're providing services for people who've been hurt most by coronavirus.
Is that a commitment that you're making? Do you want to see this next budget eliminate those corporate tax breaks?
There are certainly many things that we're trying to accomplish in this budget. Eliminating those corporate welfare items is something that allows us to balance the budget. I think it probably brings more fairness to the budget as well. But my goal ultimately is to make sure that we're managing our fiscal house in the state of Illinois properly. And that's why my budget is balanced and will actually leave us with a mild surplus.
I do want to get to those fiscal questions in a moment, but first, we are getting a lot of questions from our viewers as more people are becoming acquainted with the vaccination process. One question we hear often is how come poor people who may not have health insurance or who may be on Medicaid or don't have private health insurance, how come they're getting the less effective vaccine?
Well, that's not true. We have the J&J vaccine and the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine are really being spread all across the state of Illinois. There's no focus on communities of color or poor communities with one of the vaccines or another.
Well, many of our viewers are saying so, and the mass vaccination sites are getting the Johnson & Johnson, which is less effective than the other two.
Well, you say less effective. Remember that they're 100% effective at keeping you out of the hospital and making sure that you don't die of coronavirus. So that makes them very effective. And of course, our mass vaccination sites are visited by people of every income level all across the state. So I feel very good about the equity component here.
And a lot of people are optimistic about more of the vaccination, the onset of the vaccination, people looking forward to those days when we can go back out and about in big crowds. But going back to the start of all this, when we didn't quite know what we were getting into, at the start of the pandemic, you said time and again that you were choosing lives over livelihoods. But in the end, in the final assessment, we lost an awful lot of both. Illinois has the 7th most deaths, the 3rd most jobs lost. Those are the whole numbers. If we look per capita, we're 14th or 15th, depending on whose numbers you look at, in deaths, and 11th in most jobs lost per capita. How do you explain those numbers?
Well, let's start by just recognizing the enormity of what's happened, the challenge all across the nation, the numbers of people who've died, over 500,000 in our nation. That's more than several of our largest wars combined. This has been devastating for people. And then the financial loss that people have suffered. What I know is that following the science, we've saved thousands and thousands of lives in the state of Illinois. That is something that I've been focused on from day one, to make sure that we keep people alive, that we manage our economy at the same time. And you've seen that Illinois has done better uh, through this pandemic from an economic perspective than most people expected. And then, of course, keeping people out of the hospital, making sure our hospitals were not overrun, Mark. And our hospitals were not overrun. Look at what happened in New York. Look at what happened in Los Angeles. That didn't happen in Illinois.
There are still nearly 500,000 jobs lost that we haven't recovered yet.
It's terrible. It's terrible. And we've got to make sure that we get people back to work. That's happened also across the country. And, we've done better than some states. We were worse than other states. But overall, in the state of Illinois, what I'm very proud of is how people reacted to this extraordinary and challenging time.
A challenging time indeed, and met by a number of different factors over that same time, violence and crime being one of them. The Peoria Journal-Star reports that mass shootings are up 59% in Illinois this year. And again, compared to the national average, that's higher. Yes, there was an uptick nationally, but in Illinois, like the jobs lost, the crime spiked to a higher level. What's driving the surge in crime in Illinois?
Well, it's very hard to say exactly what's driving it. What I can tell you is that we're working very hard to try to address the underlying causes. That is to say, the poverty in communities, the challenges that young people have getting jobs and staying in school. And so we're trying to address all of those things at the same time. Coronavirus, and the ill effects of it have not helped. There's no doubt. So we have a lot of work to do. Much of the economic situation of Illinois is, although it's on the rise, it's something that we need to stoke the flames of. That's something that's very important. I mean, that I think will help us reduce violence, reduce crime, and make sure that people are getting a good living, they can earn a good living, and and that we move the state forward in a way that keeps people safe.
President Biden's American Rescue Plan includes $7.5 billion for the Illinois state government, in addition to a lot of more funding for local governments and education. But on that $7.5 billion, it strikes me that when you add up the stack of unpaid bills and borrowing in Illinois, it's higher than $7.5 billion. Much of that accruing interest penalties, late fees. Why not just pay that all down and once and for all get out from under that unpaid bill backlog?
Well, I don't disagree with you that we've got to be responsible about how we use those dollars. We've got to pay down the debts that we incurred as a result of coronavirus. That's really much of the purpose of those dollars. We, of course, have MLF borrowing from the federal government that we need to repay. And then, as you say, we've got bills to pay in this state that are directly associated with coronavirus. So that's what I want to make sure that we do with the dollars. We also need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to put people back to work. So some of the dollars that are available to us will be used for that. We have got to overcome the ill effects of this virus. That's what the American Rescue Plan is all about. I might note for you that one sad fact about this is that it became something very partisan. The Republicans voted against, every single Republican voted against the American Rescue Plan. And that's just, honestly, I don't understand it. Why wouldn't you stand up for the people of Illinois, especially when Illinois has sent more dollars to Washington, D.C. than we've historically gotten back from Washington? It's time for Illinois to get its fair share, and Republicans have voted against that all along.
You've talked about poverty and its role in contributing to where we are today in our society. At what point is there a tipping point in your view? Is it another trillion, another 2 trillion from now, where we start to overheat the economy, where we trigger inflation and suddenly people who make less, their buying power starts to shrink, their dollar doesn't go as far? Do you have those concerns?
Look, I think everybody should be on the lookout for inflation. But I will say that Janet Yellen, who's somebody I think everybody trusts and has a lot of confidence in, working together with the economic team that President Biden has brought forth, believe consistently and across the board that this is the right thing to do. It's especially the right thing to do because it's really the first piece of a stimulus that's going significantly to average working people and to people who really need help fighting poverty, fighting, the challenge that's hit working class people across the United States. people in Illinois deserve that kind of support, and they're getting it now because of President Biden and because of Democrats in the Congress.
As the Democratic governor of one of the largest states in the country, should Governor Cuomo resign?
Let me start by saying that there should be a thorough investigation here. And especially what we need to start with is that the women who came forward bravely to tell their stories, they need to be listened to. And those allegations investigated, and then a decision needs to get made in New York by the people of New York, by the people in the legislature in New York, whether or not Governor Cuomo should stay in office.
Democrats in Springfield are proposing and pushing this Clean Energy Jobs Act. I know in your inaugural address, you talked about reducing carbon emissions and creating a cleaner environment with more renewable energy in your budget address with clean energy. Yet right now, your administration is effectively allowing the permit of a natural gas field in LaSalle or Livingston County it's leaking, and that is permitted to stay open. Aren't there things in-house in your administration that you can do to address this gas field that's leaking 1.5 to 3 million cubic feet of natural gas or methane from its field every day? Should the Illinois Commerce Commission review that permit? What should happen there?
I know this is a story that you've followed closely, and I thank you for doing that, making sure that the public knows about this. Obviously, what we want to do is make sure that people are kept safe, and that those who are responsible for this are held responsible and accountable. And so that's a process that we have available to us in the state of Illinois. It's working its way through. I think that what I can tell you is that the consumers themselves are the people that I want to protect, and so we're going to work with the ICC and others. Obviously, we don't direct the ICC, but they do make decisions that we'll be watching closely.
All right, Governor Pritzker joining us from his office in Chicago. All the time we have for now. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Mark.
We're back in a moment with House Democrat Will Davis. Stick around.